Good evening, welcome, Tansei. I'm Daryl Stranger. One of the largest class action lawsuits in Canadian history is likely heading back to court. The federal government wants a judicial review of a recent ruling from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. In October, the tribunal refused to endorse a $20 billion deal proposed by Ottawa and the Assembly of First Nations. The money was for First Nations children who were subjected to a child welfare system that discriminated against them. But the tribunal said the new proposal doesn't follow its list of demands from their historic 2019 ruling. City Woodhouse is the lead negotiator for the AFN and the Government of Canada.
One thing that's really clear is that I think everybody knows that these kids and their families, their parents, the children affected by Jordan's principle and their families, all these people, 300,000 people that are waiting for compensation, we need to get that money out to them as quickly as possible because they've been waiting for far too long.
On the East Coast, a Mi'kmaq fisher's trial continued in Digby, Nova Scotia Provincial Court. Matthew Cope admitted he fished illegally, but says he has a constitutional right to harvest lobster to earn a moderate livelihood. Angel Moore reports.
Matt Cope admitted in court on Tuesday to fishery charges from August 2020. He was harvesting lobster in the Bay of Fundy to earn a moderate livelihood. However, he's betting his treaty right to harvest will mean he avoids a conviction.
I was 14 years old when the Donald Marshall Jr. decision was made. It's been 20-something years now. I'm 36 years old. If I keep waiting, I won't get to experience my rights in my lifetime.
Department of Fisheries officers testified Tuesday that on August 28 and 29, 2020, they seized 90 lobster traps from the Bay of Fundy. They had copies of Cope's status card tied to the inside of each trap.
I wanted them to say out loud that they knew before they took my traps that I was fishing them under treaty right. And if they did, then why would they still take them knowing that that's hindering me from exercising my treaty right?
The next trial date will be determined at the end of December, with Judge Claudine McDonald presiding. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Digby, Nova Scotia.
And to hear more about this, Matt Cope joins us from his home in Millbrook First Nation. Matt, thanks for taking some time for us. You admitted in court to breaking Canadian law. What makes you think you can avoid conviction?
Well, I was fishing under inherent treaty right, which has been affirmed in the Supreme Court of Canada. And it's been recognized in the Constitution. And this treaty's been defended before in court. It's been recognized every year. So I feel that it's Canada's obligations to fulfill their duties and to protect our treaties, and that entitles me to fish at any time.
Now, you're using Section 35 of the Constitution and the 1752 Treaty as a defense. Now, how will you prove your case?
Well, the 1752 treaty has been argued before in court, and it's been used, and it was proved to be adequate protection against the infringement of the Land Forestry Act under the Simon case. So I'm thinking that that this is almost the same, along the same lines as that case. They set a precedence with that case, and like I said, it's a mutually binding obligation between two nations, and it's their duty to uphold it.
Now, you are representing yourself. Do you think you'll be able to win? And if you lose, what will you do next?
Well, like I said, I feel like this case has already been tried and won. It's already been argued before. And since we work in common law here in Canada and we set precedents with previous court cases, it's very evident that we do have the right to fish. And I just don't feel like I need a lawyer, like I have to pay all that much money to get a lawyer when it's already been argued. So I feel my chances are pretty good. And if not, then maybe I'll have to get a lawyer and appeal it.
All right,
But
well,
hopefully it doesn't go that far.
we'll have to leave it there, Matt. Thanks for taking some time with us. Thank you, Miigwech.
No problem. Thank you.
The BC government announced they are taking steps on public safety. They laid out a plan to battle the rise in repeat violent crime through enforcement and interventions. It included 10 new Indigenous justice centres, which provide support to Indigenous people involved with the justice system. At a press conference, newly sworn-in Premier David Eby announced the new Safer Communities Action Plan. The BC government says it improves coordination between law enforcement, community services, and health providers. 10 new Indigenous justice centres over the next 2 years were included. The BC First Nation Justice Council currently runs 4 centres and said they were absolutely delighted with the announcement.
BC First Nations Justice Council is committed to bettering the lives of Indigenous people, breaking the cycles that find overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the criminal justice system, as well as providing supports that are wrap around and get at the root causes of the reason we have overrepresentation.
A well-known chief from the Yukon is stepping back from politics and has been succeeded by a new chief. At age 31, Dana Tija Tram was the youngest person to be elected chief of the Vuntut Gwitchin First Nation in Old Crow, Yukon in 2018. He's since made headlines internationally for his work on climate change. Under his leadership, his First Nation became one of the first in Canada to declare a climate emergency in 2019. In September, he was included in Time magazine's Time 100 Next list. Tram announced earlier this year he would not seek re-election. He will be succeeded by former Liberal MLA Pauline Frost. All right, we have to step aside for a short break, but first, here's a look at what Charlotte Morat-Jacobs is working on.
Hi, I'm Charlotte, reporting from Kuluktuk in Western Nunavut, home to roughly 1,600 residents. Join me as we explore everything community wellness.
I can't even remember when was the last time we had a food bank here in Kuluktuk.
From the challenges people face every day.
The people make it special. They come together and help each other out.
To the resiliency and strength community has to improve the situation. That's coming up soon on APTN National News.
Welcome back. It's an issue that's been on the mind of one residential school survivor for over 60 years. Roy Johnson, a survivor from the Yukon, claims he was sent to residential school well before he was officially enrolled as a student. While the documents that could back up his claims have likely been lost to history, Johnson says he won't stop looking for answers. Here's Sarah Connors with that story.
Because that's me right there.
While looking through a scrapbook on the former Chutla Residential School in Carcross, Yukon, survivor Roy Johnson recalls the atrocities that were committed against him. Over 60 years later, he still remembers the many abuses he suffered, like being beaten with his own belt by the principal.
That was my first experience with him. Would be many more after that.
According to federal documents, Johnson was enrolled as a student at the school from 1957 to 1964. But he argues that's not the case. Johnson says he was sent to the school at age 4, 2 years before he was officially enrolled as a student, and he wants to be compensated for that time.
This is suffering.
Johnson is a Trondukwitchin First Nation citizen from Dawson City, Yukon. He was sent to Edmonton's Charles Camsell Hospital at age 2 to treat tuberculosis. He says he returned to the Yukon and was sent directly to the school in 1955 at age 4. But his official enrollment was not until 1957. Johnson recalls at the time he was too young to be a student.
In the classrooms, I was babysitted by the teachers. I would sit in a corner.
Johnson claims he suffered horrific abuse in the 2-year time span before his enrollment. The most damaging incident happened at age 5 when he claims he was raped and threatened by another male student.
Someone told me, forget about it. Can't. A 5-year-old doesn't want to. Because he knew what happened to him.
Johnson says he experienced more abuse before he left the school nearly illiterate at age 13 in 1964. Documents show he received compensation under the Common Experience Payment Program in 2004 for the time he was enrolled as a student. But with no documentation confirming his 2-year stay at the school before his enrollment, he's been unable to receive compensation for that time.
Well, I think it's pathetic because I spent, 9 years there.
Undated documents from the Charles Camsell Hospital in Edmonton state Johnson had chickenpox in February of 1955 and would be considered for discharge in 3 months. However, it doesn't provide the date of that discharge. In 2010, Johnson appealed his compensation denial and attempted to restart the process. Both applications were denied, with one stating there is no evidence to suggest underage children were sent to the Chutla school at the time.
It's one of the struggles we've noticed for a number of survivors.
Kayla Johnston is the supervisor of education, outreach, and public programming at the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. She says it wasn't uncommon for children to be sent to residential school before they could be enrolled as a student.
So we do know of cases, or at least I have seen in some instances, children being placed in the school as a means of protection or maybe to avoid TB.
But with countless records now lost or destroyed, Johnston says many survivors in similar situations didn't get what they deserved.
I've heard lots of experiences of those who couldn't prove they were at the school. And although survivors were supposed to be given the benefit of the doubt, they weren't.
Your legal recourses, I think, are approximately zero.
David Patterson is a lawyer who specializes in Indigenous law. He says Johnson's chances for getting compensation are long gone since his particular settlement program ended years ago.
At this point, there is no process to reconsider the matter. Everybody's closed up shop and gone home.
Patterson says legal action is likely the only option for Johnson, though he's unlikely to have success.
You have what at the end of the day is a legal process, and sometimes complicated legal process, that individuals were brought into and often didn't receive the results they wanted. And the mechanisms for challenging that were obscure and complicated, and especially if you go to court, somewhat difficult for an individual to do.
I tried, but I didn't think it was, appropriate.
As for Johnson, he's continuing his search to locate records that validate his experience. He says he's speaking out now because of the discoveries of the thousands of suspected unmarked graves at various residential schools.
When they found all those children buried, I think at the time I was quite angry. If they found children younger than me.
While it's unlikely he'll ever be compensated for the time he spent at the Chutla school before he was enrolled, Johnson hopes by sharing his story, he'll one day get the apology from the federal government he feels he deserves. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
First Nation leaders in Manitoba are calling for an end to gender-based violence. This year, 13 Indigenous women have died violently in the province, including Delaney Desmarais, who was shot dead in Winnipeg earlier this month. And last weekend, a 20-year-old man was charged with murder following the death of a woman on the Sioux Valley Dakota Nation. Heidi Spence joins us now. She's with the Northern Chiefs MMIWG unit. Heidi, thanks for being here. I understand you've spoken with some of the family members of these women. How is the Indigenous community coping right now?
I would say that, our Indigenous community, it's a struggle, and it doesn't get easier every time we have to come together to work with families and support families when there's been a tragic loss that, could be poorly preventable, and, something that, we can all be a solution to be a part of.
Now, this has been an issue for a number of years, and numbers seem to keep rising. I mean, what needs to be done to put an end to this gender-based violence?
I would have to say, one of the biggest things that, would need to be done is being informed, and, taking the time to educate each other and ourselves on, what gender-based violence is, and taking those preventative steps to, with yourself and your loved ones, and, sharing the information you have, so that people know what gender-based violence is, because it can come in all different forms, and, there could be indicators too, as well as, to what, before something happens, and being aware of, some of those signs as to what, what violences looks like, like I said, because it comes in all forms. So again, just, being informed, being aware, and taking those prevention steps, and, working together.
So what are some of the things that the MMIWG liaison unit is doing to help, Heidi?
So, some of the things that we do right away, we provide supports to family members and survivors who are impacted by the issue of MMIWG. And that can be anything from, providing health and wellness supports to cultural supports. And, we also take opportunities to, go into communities and work with families and, share some of the knowledge that we have, or, tailor workshops on what maybe that they're requesting, to help empower them, and to provide them with tools for to improve their own wellness and their own healing. So it's not a one shoe fits all. We think very much outside of the box, and we also we take the lead of the families and the communities that we work with.
Before we let you go, I just wanted to ask, I know this isn't the easiest topic to talk about, but how can continually bringing awareness to this issue help the issue?
What I always say, take the time to, you can go online and, review some of what the 231 calls for justice say. take the time to, read about some of the different MMI initiatives that happen throughout the country. And even just talking to somebody who's maybe been impacted or that's a survivor, and and just listening to them as well. That's informing yourself, and and that also creates awareness, and just continuously talking about it, and not kind of letting it go quiet, because it is an important issue, and it is something that all of us have a role to help stop.
Yes, everybody certainly does have a role. Heidi, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you, Miigwech, for speaking with us today and sharing some of your insight into this.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have to step aside one more time. Up next, highlights from today's In Focus. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Jason Kershane sent in this from the shores of Lake Louise, Alberta. Pictured off in the distance, it is the world-famous hotel located along the shores of Lake Louise, just as you enter the Rocky Mountains west of Calgary. Thanks so much, Jason. We want to see your pictures, and you can email them to us by using share@aptn.ca, and your photo might be our next photo of the day. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. We begin in the east, -2 in Snow and St. John's and 0 in Halifax. -2 in Cartwright and -1 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. -4 in Quebec City and 1 degree in Montreal. 9 degrees in Toronto and 8 in Sault Ste. Marie. 7 in Elliott Lake and 5 in Wawa. -3 in Snow in Churchill and -2 in God's Lake. -1 in Snow in Barons River and +1 in Winnipeg. 2 degrees and clear in Regina and 0 in Saskatoon. +5 in Buffalo Narrows and -3 in Stony Rapids. Moving west, +2 in Snow in Fort Chipewyan and 6 in Peace River. 9 degrees in Edmonton and 10 in Lethbridge. 10 degrees in Vancouver and 9 in Campbell River. 8 degrees in Prince Rupert and 2 in Prince George. -9 in Beaver Creek and -12 in Dawson. -12 in snow in Norman Wells and -1 in Clear and Trout Lake. -12 and snowing in Fort McPherson and -11 in Inuvik. -8 in Baker Lake and -4 in Arviat. -24 in Aglulik and -17 in Clear in Iqaluit. This week on In Focus, we continued our conversation around land-based education. We spoke with many organizations taking kids out of the classroom and onto the land. Here's a look at today's episode.
We depend on the land for, shelter, food, our medicines, and I think it's very important. It's very important to me, and it's very important I pass on the teachings to our students, because a lot of our students are so disconnected with the land. And when you're disconnected with the land, you don't know the importance of what the land provides us as humans, not only as Indigenous people, but as humans.
So Bobby, why is it so important for the youth to learn these skills and to learn how to be on the land?
They're the next generation to look after our family trap lines, and I always try and teach them that to practice all their inherent rights, not just like trapping, but everything that goes with it, and then to respect the land, the animals, and understand how the animals move, what time of the year you trap them.
I've had students learn more by just walking around and observing than if I had been in a classroom pointing at a definition of a plant and showing a picture. It's a whole different experience getting out there, getting your hands dirty, and that experiential learning piece is really critical, I think, to having a memorable experience that the students can draw back from and continue to feel passionate and inspired.
It's really part of their identity of who they are, and we want to make sure that our footprint is on the land, that we use the land and take care of it as stewards of the land. And a lot of our students like being out there. It's not a hardship for them to be out there. As a matter of fact, a lot of them want to stay on even after the 5 days that they're there.
All right, that's all we have for you on this Wednesday edition of APTN National News. If you missed any of our stories or want to learn more, you can head to our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us, Miigwech, and have a great night.